Listen carefully. I'm going to tell you a story about a place called Shadow House. People in the town of Blackridge still whisper about it. They say no one should go near the old road at night, because at the end of that road, Shadow House waits. It's dark, silent, and hungry. 16-year-old Evelyn Carter didn't believe in ghost stories. Her mother died when Evelyn was 10. Her father spent every night drinking. Evelyn thought real life was scarier than any haunted house. But one night, she found a letter in her mother's old jewelry box. The letter was sealed with red wax. It was from Shadow House. The letter told her mother to stay away. It said the shadows were awake. That letter changed everything for Evelyn. She waited until midnight. Then she took a flashlight, her mother's locket, and the letter. She walked out of her father's house. The moon was thin and cold above her. The wind felt like it was watching her. She reached the iron gates of Shadow House. They were covered in rust. When she pushed them open, they groaned so loud it sounded like someone screaming far away. She stepped inside. The wooden floors cried under her feet. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight. The walls were covered with old paintings of people she didn't know. But then she saw something strange. One portrait looked exactly like her mother. She kept walking until she reached a big library. Books were scattered everywhere. The air smelled old and wet. In the corner there was a tall mirror. Its frame was black and twisted. She looked into the mirror, but instead of her reflection, she saw a man standing behind her. He was thin, wearing an old suit, his face hidden in the shadows. She turned around fast. No one was there. Then the man's voice came from the mirror. It was cold and slow. He said, "Welcome home, Evelyn." She dropped her flashlight. The light moved wildly. Something crawled along the ceiling above her. Its long white arms pulled it closer. It laughed with a dry, cracking sound. Evelyn ran. She found herself in a giant ballroom. It was dark and freezing inside. Broken glass covered the floor. Suddenly, music started playing. It was an old song, like a waltz, coming from somewhere unseen. Then ghostly figures appeared around her. They wore torn dresses and black suits. Their faces were blurry. They began to dance around Evelyn. Their cold hands touched her. Every time they touched her, she felt weaker. She tried to scream, but the music got louder. And then, as quickly as they appeared, the dancers were gone. The music stopped. Silence fell over the room. She ran from room to room. Every place was worse than the last. In one room, she saw toys covered in blood. In another, a dinner table set with rotten food and bones. In a hallway, dozens of clocks ticked backward all at once. Finally, she reached a bedroom. She found an old diary on the bed. It belonged to Isabella Whitaker, the last owner of Shadow House. The last words written in the diary said, "The shadows came again tonight. They are hungry. I am afraid this house will never let me leave." Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned around. A tall figure stood in the doorway, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. The smell of dirt and death came with him. He spoke in a voice like gravel. He said, "She tried to escape. So will you." Evelyn grabbed the diary and ran. The house twisted around her. Hallways grew longer. Doors led back to the same rooms. Voices whispered her name from the walls. She saw shapes moving just outside the light. A crawling child, a woman with a mouth too big, and a shifting black shape that never looked the same twice. She burst into the kitchen. She locked the door with a chair. A gas lamp on the counter turned on by itself. The shadows on the walls danced like they were alive. She opened the diary again. Pages flipped on their own. A note fell out. It said, "The mirror holds the key, but it must be broken before the last bell tolls." Somewhere deep in the house, a big clock began to strike. One loud, slow chime. She knew time was running out. The clock kept chiming. Each toll echoed through the halls like a death sentence. Evelyn left the kitchen. She moved fast, gripping the diary in one hand and her flashlight in the other. The house was alive. The walls groaned. The floors shifted under her feet. She heard voices calling her name from every direction. She passed through a hallway filled with mirrors. In each mirror, she saw herself, but her reflection was twisted. Some showed her with hollow eyes. Some showed her bleeding. Some showed her already dead. She ran. The clock rang again. The second chime. She found herself back at the Grand Library. The mirror was still there. It looked darker than before. The air around it felt cold enough to burn. She took a deep breath. She remembered the note. The mirror holds the key, but it must be broken before the last bell tolls. She picked up a broken chair leg. Her hands were shaking. Then the man in the old suit stepped out of the shadows. His face was still hidden. His voice was deeper than before. He said, "You cannot leave. You are one of us now." Evelyn screamed and swung the chair leg at the mirror. The clock chimed a third time. The sound made the whole house shake. Cracks spread across the mirror's surface. The man lunged at her. His hands were cold as ice. He tried to pull her away from the mirror. His grip was strong. She felt her strength leaving her. But she kept hitting the mirror. With each strike, the cracks grew wider. The shadows around the room screamed in voices that weren't human. The portraits on the walls began to bleed dark liquid. The floorboards split open like wounds. The clock rang the fourth chime. The mirror shattered with a loud, high-pitched crack. Pieces of glass flew through the air. A blast of icy wind rushed out of the broken mirror. It knocked Evelyn off her feet. The man in the suit shrieked as his body broke into smoke and disappeared into the darkness. The shadows in the room began to fade. The air felt warmer. The whispers stopped. The floor under her stopped moving. Evelyn stood up slowly. Her flashlight flickered, then shone steadily again. She looked around. The library was quiet. The portraits on the walls were empty now. The faces were gone. She stepped out of the library into the hallway. The house was changing. The walls weren't warped anymore. The doors stood still. The air smelled only of old wood and dust, not rot. The clock told a fifth time, softer than before. She ran through the house, back toward the main doors. The hallways no longer twisted. The doors opened the way they should. She reached the grand entrance. The sixth chime rang. She pulled the heavy front door open. The night air rushed in, cold but clean. Moonlight lit up the front steps. The iron gates stood open in the distance. Evelyn stepped outside. The seventh chime sounded behind her. It was the last one. She looked back at Shadow House. The windows were dark. The walls were silent. The house looked empty. For the first time, it seemed like just an old, abandoned building. She walked down the path through the iron gates and back to the road. The wind blew gently through the trees. She heard nothing but the rustling of leaves. She felt the weight of the diary in her hand. She knew she would never forget what happened here. But she also knew she had survived. And the shadows had lost.